All right, I have just finished watching Homework, the 17th and final film included in this set, Abbas Kiarostami early shorts and features. That's part of Eclipse Series 47, coming out this Tuesday, November 18th, from the Criterion Collection, as it says on the spine, Eclipse from Criterion, with a Criterion logo where there used to be a wacky E, kind of the Criterion C with the horizontal line drawn through it to make the letter E. So yeah, they have done some rebranding with this set, but I'm not really here to talk about that. I want to just kind of give you an impression of what's in this set. I'm not going to go film by film. That would probably be a little bit tedious in this kind of short video clip format. And I do plan to cover these films in much greater detail in my podcast called The Eclipse Viewer, which has been dormant for several years, but now with the relaunching of the series, my friend Trevor Barrett and I are going to be giving it a go again, and we're going to start recording as soon as this coming weekend as we break this 17 film set up into smaller, more manageable segments, both manageable for you, the listener. We're not going to cover all 17 in one big episode, and also for me and Trevor, the podcast hosts and commentators, to not have to have all 17 films crammed into our short-term memory to talk about them with some kind of insight and intelligence. But yeah, so let me just kind of talk about these films. Kiarostami came to his greatest prominence probably with this film, Taste of Cherry. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in 1997. This really put him on the kind of international cinema map, but he had made some other excellent films. A Close Up is another one that's been very highly regarded. That was from 1990. And then, of course, there's the Coker trilogy, which has been especially beloved, I think, in more recent years as Criterion put this really splendid, gorgeous box set together. These are the films that preceded all of that. This is basically the making of Abbas Kiarostami, the auteur, the world-class master of cinema, as he became known and celebrated for in more recent decades. But here we see him toiling out of pretty obscure beginnings as far as what he eventually achieved with his international status. He was a filmmaker working for Kanun, which is this Iranian Children's Institute for Moral and Character Development. That's not the official title, but it's along that line. Basically a government agency started by the wife of the Shah of Iran before the Iranian Revolution. They made films for the cultural betterment and education of young people, and also for the edification and education of parents and others in society, as he kind of presented, he and others. He wasn't like the only guy doing this for Kanun, but his perspective was to say, let's look at the issues surrounding our children and this upcoming generation, and try to be responsible as far as shaping these young lives. And so his films kind of had a little bit of that didactic purpose, and that as you sort of think about it, this is a very unusual way for a filmmaker to sort of come to prominence, and especially since it didn't seem like he necessarily aspired to that level of fame and exposure early on in his career. So these movies are going to come at you from a different angle. This is a very unconventional approach to filmmaking. Many of the films are going to require some focused discipline because there's a limited variety. There's a lot of these films that are just straight up interviews. There's a person, it's often a great majority of it, just the children, talking heads speaking directly to the camera. There's others that are more like based on a kind of a series of ideas or concepts where he's just kind of playing it out and sort of having a debate or a dialogue on screen about what's the best way to address this problem or this condition, this social situation that he's exploring. Some are made specifically for young people to think through the decisions and choices they make. Others are probably pitched more towards an adult audience to give us some insight into the world of children and how they relate to each other, how they respond to adult authority and expectations and all of that. So these are mostly available on the Criterion channel. There's a couple titles apparently that did not get the streaming rights, whatever reasons behind that, I don't know. But you can't watch the entire set on the Criterion Channel, but you can watch enough of these films if you have access to that streaming service to sort of see for yourself as to whether this is something you would want to add to your collection. If you are a diehard fan of Abbas Kiarostami, then there's not any question about it. This is a great set to have if you really want to get into his roots. And while these films don't necessarily have some of the narrative fascination that comes with his later films, some of the titles I've shown, and especially the stuff that comes after that, like with The Wind Will Carry Us and Beyond, where he gets really innovative and more experimental, and his narrative structures become even more deft and alluring and surprising. These are pretty basic films, but they give you a sort of a great informed sense of how he got to be the filmmaker that he's best known for. And they are really thought-provoking films in and of their own right. It's just they don't have some of the the cinematic power of beautiful images or soundtracks, or even the kind of stories that kind of get us caught up in the sweep of history or intense interpersonal dynamics. These are very quotidian films about everyday problems and situations, but they are vital because they're talking about, again, the raising up of children and the way that adult inputs shape personalities, or how kind of the character traits that a child brings into the world, the system, the customs and expectations of our society. Some young people are better suited to just sort of blend in and fit with whatever's told to them or expected of them than others. And so what do you do about the misfits or the rebels or the children who just very naturally demonstrate tendencies or behaviors that adult society frowns upon and doesn't want to see happen? What do you do with instructors who maybe misuse their authority or just make inappropriate decisions based on their emotional responses to whether the children are sufficiently compliant to their expectations? Some of these films are funny. Some of them are very, witty and amusing and humane. Others are a little bit more like endurance tests. Kiarostami does interesting stuff with soundtracks and with editing. His very straightforward approach to filmmaking in terms of cinematic effects and camera shots and framing and all of that makes him seem very simplistic and almost maybe primitive at times. But there's a lot of intelligence that goes into pretty much every single one of these films, and multiple layers and perspectives you can view it from to withdraw different messages and impacts from what he has to say. So, yeah, 17 films over the course of 19 years. The last one, Homework from 1989, actually overlaps with the Coker trilogy and is included in this same set. So, and I think there's a couple other titles that might have been included as supplements in some of the other Kiarostami releases. So yeah, I'm going to have a lot more to say about it. I love this set. I love the fact that the Eclipse series is back. And if you're at all feeling adventurous or deciding that you really want to dig into the work of a great world cinema figure like Abbas Kiarostami, this is the set for you.